Hello and thank you for joining us. This is Brian, your host of the Perish the Thought Show. The opinions of said host and our guests have not been sanitized or scientifically tested, so please consume at your own risk. Ladies and gentlemen, and whoever else is listening, welcome back to the program. Thanks again for listening. I appreciate you taking the time. My guest today is Kris Kristensen for the third time in a series of I don't know how many, as we document his journey that started about 2 years ago with stage 4 pelvic cancer. And due to this stage 4 cancer, he had to have the left side of his pelvis removed. Of course, losing a perfectly good left leg. During this series, we have been documenting, and Kris has been telling his story of how he is coping physically, mentally, and most recently, the challenges he is facing trying to get back into the workplace. So let's get into this. Just wanted to say welcome back, and this is our third interview since your life changed. And it's been pushing 2 years this fall, correct?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. September 2nd will be the second year anniversary of finding out I had cancer. And then the 23rd will be the second year since the surgery.
Tell us what's been happening since last time we chatted about 9 months ago, I think is the last time we talked.
Well, let's see.
How's your progress
here.
coming along?
You know, the progress with the leg is coming along pretty well. I've been working hard on developing my technique and learning how to walk in various different scenarios, like out in the grass and up and down stairs and across the sides of hills and that sort of thing. And that's been coming along really well. And in fact, so well that the prosthetist and the main doctor who's now managing my care think that it's time to put new hardware on my leg. So they're hoping to be able to get a new ankle joint and a new hip joint for me. So that's been coming along really well.
How is it different from your current one?
Well, the current one on the hip, it only swings back and forth. So it only goes from front to back.
Oh, okay.
So there's no twisting that goes on. Like when you normally walk, there's a little bit of twisting going on inside your hip joint, where it twists side to side. And so a new hip would allow it to go both forward and back and then spin on its axis a little bit. So you can navigate stairs easier. You can navigate rough terrain easier. And the same thing with the ankle joint. It articulates in more places. So that way, if you stumble on a rock or something like that, the ankle joint can adjust for the different angles that your foot may be in. So those are relatively new developments. I hope to find out more about that next week. And if that happens, it'll be a real game changer as far as setup with my leg and all of that is concerned.
Yeah, what parts of your body are now strengthened in ways you never thought they would be, and because you said you have to use your abdominals to swing your leg, so you're probably got a 6-pack from right?
Well, the 6-pack is being covered up by a nice layer of padding.
But
you too, huh? Yeah, well, actually the crazy thing is the doctor and the prosthetist have told me that I have to put on some weight, otherwise the prosthetic leg won't fit. So I've got to put on some weight. Otherwise it all starts shrinking, it atrophies down there.
Yeah.
So the only way to keep up the size is to put on some weight. But that means it doesn't go to your stump first off, it goes to your belly first and then transitions from there out. So I got to eat a lot. And I've got to eat a lot of high calorie food. So I drink weightlifters mass gainer stuff.
Oh, that
so
like
it's like
that
protein
whey
powder with
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of protein powder with excess carbs in it.
So like the big meathead muscle bound weightlifting guys, you're eating the same kind of diet.
Yeah, pretty much, pretty
Yeah.
much. But it's hard to put weight on actually, given my digestive changes too.
How explain a little bit about that, how that works now with your digestive? Because I was reading this about the colon, about how that's where most of your water's absorbed.
Yeah.
So
So all
how
the
does that
water
work
is
now?
absorbed. Yeah, the colon is a great big dehydrator. It takes all the water out of whatever it is you're eating, but it also sucks out some of the nutrients that you eat. Um, and because it's what generally causes problems for most people, that's why most people have high fiber diets, is to clean that thing out. Well, I don't have one of those anymore, so I don't eat high fiber foods. So like salad is off the list. Carrots specifically are off the list because they just go straight through you, and that can cause some problems. Um, but getting the colon cut out does change the way you digest your food. And I'm not entirely sure on all of the different ways how it's been explained to me, but apparently it cuts down your absorption of some of the vitamins and minerals you might otherwise get. And because you can't eat fibrous foods, then you need to get the the vitamins from those, like salad vitamins, whatever's in that. You got to get that from some other source. So it's a lot of vitamin tablet supplements and that sort of thing. Um, but then you got to put weight on. So it's really a matter of keeping the colon healthy, or pardon me, keeping the small intestine healthy, and pumping through as much food through it as you can to make sure that there's enough stuff there to be digested.
So when you're eating now, I mean, in terms of being full and not full, is that's I assume the same
Oh yeah, yeah,
because the
yeah.
stomach's
So
not
you can,
affected.
yeah, the stomach's not affected at all. So you eat until you're full, and then you stop eating. But then the small intestine then takes over and does its job, and then because you don't have a large intestine, you can't necessarily predict um, when everything else that would normally happen with your digestive system happens. So you can't predict necessarily when you're going to have to go running off to the restroom or something like that. You have to kind of figure it out and time it from when you last ate until the time things start moving around. So if you like, I found that if I eat after 7 o'clock, I have to wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and go racing to the restroom to empty the ostomy bag. But if I stop, then I can get all the way till about 5 or 6.
Okay. Well, then talk a little bit about how you managing all that since you've just recently done some traveling out west. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk a little bit about how all that worked and the normalcy or the newness of all that. So people have been pretty good about adjusting then for that.
Yeah, I think for the most part, in fact, between the prosthetic leg and my digestive dietary needs, everybody's been very accommodating. In fact, I'm quite surprised at just how accommodating people are. If you just let them know that you've got these special needs, well, especially when you can see that there's a leg missing and
Yeah.
you've got a prosthetic leg, and then you announce, I also have digestive issues that I got to pay attention to. People generally are quite sensitive to that. Furthermore, when they can see you coming and when people see you walking down the street, they're generally pretty accommodating to you. For example, I was in Manhattan at Times Square not long ago, and I have my crutches. I have my crutches. They're covered in fluorescent green wrapping so that they really stick out. And as I'm walking around, and there's thousands of people walking around that place, as I walk down the street or through the crosswalks, people would form this bubble around me. Is that people would walk head on towards me, and then they'd scoot all around me and create this little bubble, a little pocket in the flow of people as I would be walking. And that was unbelievable to me because normally you're getting smacked and smashed and
Oh
hit
yeah.
and bumped into.
New York, people, no one's looking at any, they're looking at their phone and self-absorbed. And so for that to happen as a miracle, that's like the parting of the Red Sea.
Yeah,
For
well, it's exactly what it was like. And so, and then they open doors for you when you least expect it, or pick stuff up for you when you drop it, which is not like the stereotypical
New
big
Yorker.
city people that you run into, right?
Yeah. Well, that's good. See, you've just shed some light on New York, the gruff, rough New Yorker that maybe isn't
Well,
true.
in fact, I found that the gruff, rough New Yorker isn't really so gruff and rough. They're not so mean and nasty. It's just they're busy,
Trying
and
to,
in fact, they're very nice. Mostly,
yeah, there's
they're
no,
just regular people, but they're very busy.
yeah. And that's what I've learned in the last, because my daughter moved there to Brooklyn last fall, and I'd never
Oh,
been to
that's
New
right.
York until helping her get there. And so I've been there twice now, and it's an interesting place. I love it. I loved it.
Yeah,
But it's very interesting on how everyone's busy. They don't look at each other, but you know where you stand with them too, which is nice. But
yeah. Well, and that's a byproduct of being busy. We don't have time to waste with any bull crap. We just want to get straight to the heart of the matter.
get her done. Um, how are things adjusting with the family, kids? You still have
Yeah.
one at home, or are they all gone now?
Well, they're all at home right now.
Oh,
So our oldest two graduated from college, and our second oldest got accepted immediately to graduate school, just as she was accepting a position at a job, which was really nice. So she's a graphic designer doing computer design stuff with a company, and then they're paying for her to go to graduate school. And our first oldest is now just recently accepted to a graduate degree program in nursing out here at a local university. Well, it's about an hour from here, at a university where she's going to become a nurse practitioner. And then right after that, she's going to go into the doctorate of nursing program. So she'll become a doctor, although a different kind of doctor than your typical MD or DO.
did any of your kids' career plans change based on all the experiences that you've had with you and your situation, or has that stayed the same?
Not necessarily changed. Our oldest daughter went from wanting to become a physician assistant, a PA, to becoming a DNP, a doctor of nurse practitioning, um, largely because that was the quickest road for her to get to be a medical doctor, a licensed doctor, which she wanted to use to help out people like me. That said, she doesn't want to necessarily deal with the population of people like me. She wants to work in more dynamic settings, like an emergency room setting, which is very interesting. Um, but then our third child, her plans may have changed a little bit. She doesn't really know exactly what she wants, but because of the situation that we've just gone through, it's really caused her a little bit of an existential, I wouldn't say crisis, but there's been a lot of existential questioning going on as to who am I and what do I want to be and what do I want to do. And then our youngest, it's actually really focused her on what she wants to do. So, in that regard, I suppose my situation has impacted some of their career choices and educational plans, but by and large, it's all been about the same, just variations on a theme.
Tell me, like the career that you had, the job that you had, are you able to do any of that anymore? Or how is that all working out?
Well, that is an interesting question. So I'm about to the point in my rehabilitation where it's probably time to get back to work, to do something fulfilling and to do something meaningful professionally. And I have been contacted by recruiters who have trolled LinkedIn and other places where my resume happens to be posted. And they have reached out to me saying they've got great jobs. And so I have been interviewing for some jobs, some of which were exactly like, well, almost exactly like the job that I just left. And I would have been a shoe-in for them until they find out two things. One, how old I am. And then secondly, I have a disability. Namely, I've got one prosthetic leg. And when they find those two things out, they generally run out of interest in wanting to hire somebody like me. And so it's becoming, and this has happened now 6 or 7 times in the last 6 weeks or so. And it's making me believe that ageism and disability isms are
Are real.
two, yeah, they're very real. Yeah, people don't want to hire people like that. And it's unfortunate, but it's really the way it goes, you know. And that's been frustrating. That's been a blow to the ego because 1 minute you're working just fine in your career and you're going at top speed and everything is working just fine. And then you wake up the next morning only to find out you have cancer and everything changes. And then from then on, it's like your ability to make a contribution just vanishes, just vanishes. So after being out on disability leave for, what was it, about 6 months or so, then the company had to let me go because I was filling up a job that they needed to get done, and I couldn't do it because I was stuck in the hospital. So they let me go. And since the time they let me go, no one wants to hire me.
Do they give you some kind of spiel that, when you're better, you can come back, or or do they just cut you off completely and that's it?
No, well, they cut you off. They cut you off immediately, but they do say, when you're ready, come on back. But there's always a caveat attached to that, which is we have to have a job, an open position for you to fill, and that open position may or may not have the same salary as the last position you just had. So you might not be making the same amount of money even if you do come back.
That is rough.
It is rough. In fact, it's very frustrating.
Well, yeah, it's because
So,
it insults the gifts that you had. They still have, not had, that you have, that you can
yeah,
still
that's right.
perform it. You can still do those things. You can still do all the things you were doing before, can you not?
That's right. I could do them all,
It's
but
just your mind.
yeah, it was all about the mind, and there was very little that required um, much involvement with the body, other than you got to move to get from one appointment to the next. But that's about all that would have been disrupted. So, because of these surgeries, because of this cancer that I had, I've lost my leg, I've lost my large intestine, I lost my job, and now it looks like I've lost a career.
So what's going through your mind in terms of how to move forward?
Again, that's another fantastic question. And the short answer is I don't know. The main discussion here at my house is what will I do for the next 10 or 15 years before before I have to officially call it quits and retire. But um, it's it's really hard to know what the next step is going to be, especially if you get another big corporate job. There's always the risk that they'll let you go. And so if they let me go, then I would lose all claim to any disability benefits that I had. And so it's a gamble. It's always a bit of a gamble. Do you go take a new job and risk your disability benefits, which right now keeps the lights on and food on the table? Or do you stay with the disability benefit and let your career go goodbye and not look at working like that ever again? So it's a bit of a catch 22.
So you're still getting disability benefits from your last company, correct?
That's right. I bought a disability insurance policy through my company, which pays a certain percentage of what my salary had paid. And it will last until I'm 65. And then after that, then I'm on my own.
So if you were to go out and get something else or get another job or start freelancing or doing your own thing, would you still, that's a policy you can still use, or would they cut that off too?
No, no, no,
So it's
no, no.
so it's
If you
kind of
go out and
like
start,
so it's kind of like the unemployment where it gives you just enough to survive, but if you try to get a job and have it, they cut you off, so it almost keeps you down.
that's right.
Just
Or they
similar.
claw the money back. That is, they will give you a certain amount of money. And if you earn any money over the amount that they give you, then they'll take that money back and say that it's theirs because, the agreement was, the policy is that you will get a benefit of X number of dollars. Anything over X, they'll claim belongs to them. So you can't ever make more than what the policy benefit states you can, unless you want to cut off the policy and tell them quits.
So it's almost designed. Both systems are designed to keep you down.
In a
Maybe
way,
not
I think
designed that
that's
way, but
fair.
that's what happens.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
That's a horrible. That's almost like encouraging dependence to some
Yes,
extent.
it really is. It really is. I don't know if they thought that through before they enacted those kinds of policies. But what it does is it does create a culture of um, creates a culture of laziness. Because why would you go out and expand your mind, expand your knowledge, try new things, work harder at this, work harder at that, if there's no way to gain from it?
Yeah, it caters to base human nature.
It has some interesting psychological dimensions then to it.
And those, yeah, explain where you're going with that.
So if you can never make more money than what your benefit has, then you're not motivated. And if you're not motivated, the temptation is to just lay around all day, eat Rice Krispie treats, and watch television and do nothing because you're not going to make any more money anyway. Then there's the fact of, I was the main breadwinner, and I suppose I still am, but it's coming through a different means. But your sense of manliness and fatherliness are taken away because man should do man stuff. A man should take care of his family, should be going to work every day, taking care of his family, and now you don't go to work every day. You're not feeling like you're taking care of your family. You're feeling like you're something else.
Because
And
that's how the world
so
defines a man to some extent.
Uh, yeah, that's exactly right. You get defined in terms of what it is you do and the things that stem from that. What you do and how you do it kind of define you as a man, or even in some unfortunate circumstances, defines how women see themselves. And so, if you're not careful, you can start thinking that you don't add any real value, and that creates a rabbit hole.
That's a dark, dark place to be.
Yeah, you don't want to go down that rabbit hole very far because it's hard to climb out of it.
So, what are you spending most of your time doing now?
Well, my wife went back to graduate school, so I've been giving her some tutoring along the way. For example, she just finished a statistics class yesterday. And I used to teach that stuff. So I would give her mini lectures along the way because the class that she was taking was all asynchronous online. So it was all read this and do these problems. And there was no real verbal explanation as to what was going on, and nobody could really ask questions to and get real time answers to. So I would give her little mini lectures as she was going through her coursework, which ended up proving to be very valuable for her. She scored very well. Um, Even though the course was officially graded as pass fail, she still achieved like 94, 95% of her grade. So that was very fulfilling, being able to help supplement her education. So I spent a lot of time doing that. I spent a lot of time reconsidering the management of my household. So I do a lot of the day-to-day stuff around my house. I can't get down to the laundry room so much. So that becomes a little awkward. But otherwise, managing, making sure that dinner gets put together, making sure that we've got people knowing where they're supposed to be going and who's doing what. A lot of that stuff I do.
And are you're just still looking in just your field, or are you trying to look outside that field now to maybe something else that you could, because you're a brilliant man. And
Brilliance is a hard thing to measure.
Well, let me rephrase that. You're a deep thinking kind of a person, and yeah.
Well,
it is hard to measure. You're right.
It's still very hard to measure, but I have been looking primarily in my field because that's where I think the most immediate opportunities lie. That said, there are few opportunities in my field right now, directly in my field. Well, let me take that back. There are a number of opportunities in my field. And every day I get job alerts from various websites that indicate that there are jobs in my field. The problem is, and this is where my discrimination biases come into play, is that there are a lot of people that as soon as they find out, again, just how old I am, they turn and run the other way because they want somebody younger and cheaper. I just turned 55 this year.
Okay. So you're the speed limit in some places.
In some places.
And they want younger, higher, because they can hire, because they don't cost as much, because they don't know as much, right?
That's right. So they're not willing to spend a lot of money. And even though the U.S. is reporting record high unemployment numbers, or record low unemployment numbers, the employment that they're looking at primarily is whether or not you're willing to make $15 running around an Amazon warehouse. Those kind of jobs, they can't hire people quick enough. But people in my line of work don't necessarily get hired quite so speedily. And when they do, they're not necessarily, well, clearly they're not making $15 an hour. They're making something significantly more than that. So they judge very carefully who they want to put into those roles.
Because they see value in only salary, not what someone can bring to the table necessarily.
Yeah, not necessarily. Exactly.
Yeah, it is kind of a messed up system because they're missing out on the wealth of knowledge you have and how you could probably save them a bunch of money by doing things differently and better because you have a different perspective.
That's exactly right. But they don't want to pay for that because most people see.
Go ahead. Well, they will pay for it. They'll pay for it later.
Mm-hmm. That's right. One way or another, they will pay for it.
Wow.
Yeah, one way or another, they will pay for it. It's just a matter of whether they want to pay for it now or whether they're going to do it sometime down the road.
Yeah, and that's less measurable down the road, so it's easier to justify probably.
Yep, that's exactly right.
That's messed up. I'm
unfortunate,
sorry, man.
But true. No, it is unfortunate. And again, that can really mess with your head if you're not too careful. Again, it can lead you down some rabbit holes about where do you add value. If you don't add value in the job market and you can't do quite as much at home, I'm running around in a wheelchair today because my prosthetic leg is starting to create more wounds again, which I don't want. You can't do quite as much at home. You can't do as much as you want to at work. You start wondering, well, what can you do? What is it you're really able to do in order to create value here for your family, for your community, for whomever. And it's a very challenging thing.
Answer that question, I guess, for us. What are you doing there, trying to add more value? Because I know you this whole series we've been talking about. You mentioned the best thing you can do is try to serve anyone and everyone around you.
Yeah. So that is still the key dimension, I think, is if you serve and you serve with your whole heart, then you don't go down the rabbit hole quite so easily. So, for example, I just accepted some new responsibilities with my church community. So I get to work with, the adult leaders over a bunch of boys across, across a large unit and or number of units. So I'm in the Stake Young Men's presidency now, and so there's a lot of service that has to go on there. And the more I dedicate myself to that, the less angsty I get. The more I dedicate myself to making sure my wife is taken care of, the less angsty I get. The more I dedicate myself to making sure that my house is open to strangers, like my children's friends or other people who don't have a place to go, then that makes you feel really good. So a lot of those service things still are at play. The problem comes in when you try to catalog what are all the service opportunities. And that can be a bit of a challenge because sometimes due to your mobility and ability to get around and about, sometimes it's hard to see what's going on out there in the community where there's help that's needed. That said, when you're out in the community, you can do a lot of good because people want you to be at some of these events because it's inspiring to have you there. What I mean by that, I have a friend who sells real estate, and he was hosting a mini real estate convention with many of his clients and many of the vendors that he works with, like the homeowners insurance people um, and the mortgage brokerage people and all of those other vendors and that work with clients, plus a handful of clients. And he wanted me to speak about what the experience is like coming through all of this stuff. So I gave a short address. I gave like a 40-minute address to these people and just talked about how my experience really mattered to me and what I could do about it. And then pointed out to them that each of them has something significant going on in their world. May not be cancer, may not be the loss of a limb, but there's something significant going on in everybody's life at any given time. Like I'm sure there's something going on in your life right now that you wish you weren't going through. I'm sure
Every
of
house
it.
has a story.
That's right. And so all we need to do is be reminded of the fact that getting outside of yourself is a very good and important thing to do. And it's good and important because that's the only way to break free of the solipsism that you can slip into where it's only you and your story that matters.
Yep, that makes sense. Because you just wallow in it.
Mm-hmm. And so writing is a very useful tool. If you sit down and journal about some of this stuff and just write,
Put your
and you get all of the stuff out, whatever's on your mind, you just put it on paper. It becomes objectified, and then you can put it on a shelf. Put it in a box, put that box on the shelf, and walk away from it. If you need it, you know which box it's in. You know where on the shelf that box sits. Um, You can open it up and add more to it or take stuff away.
So
But
when
then
are
you
you giving
box
your
it back
next?
up and put it away.
When are you giving a TED talk
I'm
about
afraid
this?
nobody wants to hear me right now.
Yeah, I don't know. Public speaking.
Well,
This is a great ordeal you've been through.
it is a great ordeal, and I don't know when the next opportunity to share any of this is going to come along. I mean, you're gracious enough to want to hear some of my ramblings, but it really depends on when there are people who want to hear what I have to say. And when that happens, I'm glad to share.
Yeah, definitely TED talk. I can see you up there with your shiny green sticks.
With my shining green sticks and my
Mm-hmm.
8 minutes of time to speak.
Yeah, I
Not
think
so
you'd be
bad.
great. You'd be great and inspire, many, many, many people. I know we mentioned it a little bit, but you started traveling again and you came out west. So tell people how that worked with flying and and hiking, quote unquote,
Hiking, as it were.
as it
Sure.
were.
So uh, I have a benefactor who is quite anonymous, who bought an electric motorized scooter for me. So it's a three-wheeled scooter and it folds up to the size of a suitcase. So you can fold it up and take it on the airplane with you, or you can unfold it and use it as a scooter and get around. And so we got to the airport, we unfolded it, and I was able to navigate the airport just fine. Security was an interesting opportunity, interesting experience, because I've never had anything like that. I've flown for 20 years. I've been traveling significantly. And you go through security and they do the metal detectors, and then they do sometimes that full body scan thing, and they do all kinds of stuff to make sure you're not carrying any bombs on you or what have you. But I rolled up to security with my prosthetic leg and my electric scooter, and they just kind of waved me on through. They didn't even look at my driver's license to verify my identity. So they just waved me on through. And then the guy on the other side of security just wanted to test my hands to see if I had explosive residue on my hands.
Just
And
like,
that was it. And
so there's the
so then was
upsides.
there's the upside, and then scootered all the way over to where my plane gate was and got on the airplane. We folded down the scooter and set it off there, set it off to the side, and the airplane, the baggage people were kind enough to load it on to the airplane right there at the end of the jet bridge. And then when we got to the destination, they unloaded it right there at the jet bridge, and we were able to unpack it, and I was able to navigate the airport. So that was all really good. And when we were in the airport, we wanted to get a bite to eat, but it was so crowded. There wasn't a table anywhere. But here comes up this guy with one leg on an electric scooter, and people are just giving up their seats. Say, here, you take this seat. But I
So
had
there's
my
some
wife and my daughter with me, so we'd have whole parties of people just vacate where they were sitting and what they were doing, so we could sit down and eat.
just some upsides to it.
Yeah, what you find out is that people are generally pretty decent.
Yeah, I think so
People
too.
are decent. No matter where you go in this country, there are decent people everywhere.
And they are the majority. And
Yes, I think
it's easy
so.
to get hung up on the ones that aren't, because that's just human
Yeah,
nature to focus on something that's different.
the under the political turmoil that's going on right now, it's nice to see the fact that regardless of your affiliations politically, most people are very empathetic, and they like to help. They
There's
like very
there,
much to help. They want to help.
there's political turmoil. What do you mean?
Hmm. In a future day, people might not get that reference.
I hope a future day people won't get that reference, but I have a feeling that's gonna always be with us now.
I have a feeling you're right.
But it gives us opportunities to to love those that are different, which is good. That's my theory.
Well, yeah. And it goes to our point. People are decent in the majority, they're decent. It's just when you get on the fringes where you end up with some of the whack jobs. And some of those people I've run into, and they're not so accommodating.
Well, funny you mentioned that. I have a new friend who's a police officer in Louisville, Kentucky, and he's got a podcast and he's written a book, and he reached out to someone who clearly has not the same values, and I'd never had like direct experience with trolls,
Mm-hmm.
and both of us tried to engage these people in decent conversation because they want their story told. But we said, hey, here's two platforms, here's two podcasts. Do you want to come share? We're gonna be totally fair and kind and loving, and it was interesting. No matter what you did or how nice you were, it just got worse and worse the more you
No
tried to ask
kidding.
questions. It was I'd never been nervous on social media, but I went into my social media accounts and took off some of my personal information because I felt nervous. That people like that, they don't care. They just want to destroy you.
So you were worried about them coming and finding you?
Or just doxing you, telling people where
Mm.
you were. And it was really fascinating because he was so respectful to this guy, so respectful. And they do not care. And angry, angry, angry. It was really interesting because that's one of
Yeah.
my points is just to try to bridge the gap between people, and we don't have to kill each other because we think
Yeah, I
differently.
don't understand that. I don't
Yeah.
understand how people can get to that level of animosity and anger towards other people. I don't understand it.
It's easy. It's easier. That's why.
Well, I suppose you're right. It is a lazy man's proposition to just get angry. That's a default emotion, and we all know it, and we all can do it,
You know,
but it is the easy way out.
have you found yourself through this whole ordeal much different, or I mean, you always have been a good human. Have you found much change in that other than maybe better? I know you're better
Well,
now.
in some ways, I'm better, and in some ways, I have found out that there are parts of me that I don't particularly care about.
Like,
And um, it's easier to get frustrated than I thought I was, than I thought I was capable of. I thought I was more the master of my domain than that, and that I didn't get quite as bent out of shape as sometimes I do. And when some things happen and my nose gets bent out of joint, I get frustrated really quickly and can sometimes enter a fight or flight mode of being. You know, where the options are, I will stand my ground and I will box with you, whether it's physically, which I don't do, or whether it's emotionally or psychologically or academically. We'll just have fisticuffs academically, and I'll try to win those fights as often as I can. And if it's looking like it's going to cost me too much personally, well, then I'll just find a way to run away if the cost looks too high. Now, that doesn't happen all the time. That just happens when things get really rough with somebody. You know, it doesn't matter who it is, it's when it just gets rough with somebody and your fight or flight reflex just takes over. And apparently in mine, it's highly developed. So, so there are times when I've learned that there are things about me that I don't really care about. And then there are times when I realize there are things about me that are really pretty decent, that I'm a pretty decent guy when it comes to certain kinds of things. And, you know, that's paradoxical in a way because some of those things I sort of knew about, but I just didn't realize to what extent I knew about them. And some of them are brand new to me. that I've never thought about before. And so, when that happens, you got to take good when it happens. You got to check mark the W box every time you learn something like that. Just give yourself a checkbox in the win column, and then you can say, okay, good. I'm going to leave my evaluations there. I'm not going to dissect it and wonder what happened or how did I get there. I'll just take the W and get on my merry way. And same thing when things don't go so well. Just take the loss, accept it, and go on your merry way and try harder next time.
Learn from the experience, because no experience is wasted.
That's true.
At least that's what I tell myself. Well, on this third installment of the Kris Kristensen journey, what would you want to tell people that I maybe haven't asked you?
I would want to say, if you find yourself in a very hard situation, and everybody will, everybody's got something they're dealing with which is hard for them. Cut yourself a huge break. Or if it's happening to one of your loved ones, like a family member or dear close friend, cut them a break. And when you're cutting yourself a break, or you're cutting your significant other a break during all of this stuff, you've got to remember who you are. If you don't recall your identity, we sing the primary song, I am a child of God. If you forget that, even for a minute, you will slip into a dark, dreary place, and it will not turn out well for you. And so my one thing that I would say is, cut yourself a break. Things may be tough and challenging, but mentally they don't have to be as challenging as they feel sometimes. A lot of that challenge is just something that the difficulty of the challenge, the pain of the challenge, the heartache of the challenge is something that we, I don't want to say make up, but it's something that we help build. And when we can help build it in a different direction, then we really have done something. So if you're feeling like me from time to time, sad about yourself and sorry for yourself and whatever, you can turn that around and, get your money back if you've made an investment, but then build up yourself or other people along the way, and realize that, everybody's dealing with something. And if they are, have some compassion.
Realize you have control. You have so much more control than you think, at least about attitude.
That's right. You have a lot of
crucial.
control.
Well, thank you again for sharing your progress.
And it's my pleasure.
We'll do it again.
Yeah, let's do that.
I'll give you an update. Of however many. I started labeling the episodes, part 1 of 3, 2 of 3, but I'm like, maybe there will be more. There'll probably be more than 3, so I'm just saying part 1, 2, and then
there
whatever.
You go.
So
there you go.
But anyway, so thank you again for coming on and sharing.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for listening to the Parish to Thought Show. We would love your comments and feedback on our website at briankeithparish.com/feedback. If you love or hate what you hear, please give us a rating on whatever platform you find us. Hey, thanks again for listening to the show. I am so grateful you're here and continue to support my efforts. We're doing something a little new. It's called Ask Brian Anything. If you have questions, comments, concerns about any previous episode, or just want to know my perspective on anything, please send those to parishpodcast@gmail.com. That's PARRISH podcast@gmail.com, and I'll feature them on an upcoming episode. You're still here? Click on the next episode for more from the Parish the Thought Show.